talk about connecting spaces, the connecting passages between the two living spaces are most often ignored as a design aspect. I wouldn't be talking more about it because we have the person herself. Let's put your hands together for Ekta Parekh, architect Ekta Parekh from Research Inquiry Design, Mumbai.
Now that's your cue to move your attention from the gorgeous Daniel Craig and onto me. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking what the point of this video was. Well, frankly, I'm the third speaker presentation post-lunch. You guys need to wake up. But on a more serious note, when I did watch this film for the first time, one of the most striking features about this particular scene is the ease of which the interstitial spaces were woven together. Of course, supreme editing did a lot of the wonders, but it brought about a sense of how spaces create a pulse from narrow to wide in an organic manner and mainly defined by the end user. Before I began studying architecture, the word circulation meant very little to me, other than bringing to mind science classes spent learning about the movement of blood through your body. In architecture, the concept of circulation isn't so different. It refers to the way people, the blood of our buildings, move through space. Hence, it is imperative to resolve the dynamics of how people make connections through these various spaces. So what do these circulation patterns result in? They aid in connecting spaces. Spatial connections can be of varied scales and types. They can be urban, architectural, interior connections, and mind space connections. Over the course of this presentation, I'm going to briefly skim over the connections in each of these categories through some of our projects. At an urban level, I would like to walk you through a research project we did in collaboration with Columbia University. It was about revitalizing 3 varied neighborhoods in Belgrade to enhance spatial connections. Belgrade at the time was fractured at various levels: social, physical, economical, and political. However, amidst all this fragmentation, and as a reaction of the common man to it, there was an emergent uniqueness that had evolved a defense mechanism. One extremely apparent example of this was the genotypic unit of commerce in the city. It was sometimes physically and economically manifested in the form of a kiosk on the street, discotheque boats along the river, or even boutiques along private apartments. The proposal aimed at revitalizing along a central spine as opposed to concentrated centers at any particular spot. It was important to strengthen the central spine, not only to enlarge the area of flux, with the rest of the city, but also decrease the level of congestion. The strategy was to reduce the intensity of the fractures along the crack using generating units, which were designed based on the positive aspects and ideologies of the existing defense mechanism. Thus, effectively, the solution would evolve from within the system. This was what we termed as the urban middle ground, the space of the street, the space in between, the space of life and activity, a condition of touching global space by strengthening local character. 3 different conditions were identified: the hyperdense old Belgrade blocks encircling the Slavia Circle and yet being disconnected from it, the barriers of the waterfronts of old Belgrade resulting in the lack of interaction between the city and the water's edge, the emptiness or rarefaction of the modernist blocks of New Belgrade. The idea of the unit was that it would benefit the individual operating it and at the same time give back to the city, simultaneously generating urbanities at various levels. At a social level, to contribute and general public gathering space in response to the street and the need to socialize. At a physical level, to introduce human scale within a street itself. At an economic level, the reinforcement of local economy by virtue of a large collection of these units that in turn also empower the individuals that use them. At a political level, the freedom and flexibility to every individual to choose his product and schedule of work, a true sense of democracy. There were 4 types of generating units that needed to be attached to public space and combined with it in different permutations to every site-specific condition. A housing unit, a unit of work or commerce, like a studio or a small-scale industry, attached to a unit of living, which was also a part of a neighborhood or a street. A mobile unit of commerce, like a car which would unfold and sell its goods or services. A urban mall unit, which was a stationary unit of commerce. This small unit would form the economical and social trigger in the neighborhood. And a cultural unit, a unit of entertainment, art, recreation, which would be supported by and promote local culture and organize itself along public space. The underlying essence that made these units generating as compared to their standard contemporary models, but that they would add to and form part of a dynamic public space as opposed to remaining isolated from it, thereby would craft the urban city middle ground. Within an architectural design narrative, it is wise to give occupants of a room time to breathe, to absorb what they have experienced and to prepare for what is to come. If it is all an element of surprise, then design can lose its impact potential. Architecture that speaks can be well balanced with architecture that listens. And within this dialogue lies the connection. These spatial connections were established in this next project of ours. An existing client of ours lost his 22-year-old son to cancer, and his father wanted to build a charitable hospital in his name. In our research, we observed that local hospitals just about served the clinical purpose of medically treating the patient. There was no effort made to heal the mental or physical process of recuperation, which was just as important. So we tried to address that in our intervention. Owing to the extreme temperatures in Kanpur, a response sensitive to climate was inevitable. This was achieved by sculpting the building block. The hospital wing takes the form of the perimeter of the plot, with the north and eastern side tapped down to facilitate light and percolation into the central courtyard. This always stays shaded and protected due to the taller south and west walls. This space thus becomes the hub of all connectivity, visual and physical, which helps in the process of recuperation. Areas where people tend to get bored or restless, like waiting rooms of the OPD, have been thoughtfully placed within this atrium so that visual and physical engagement of people can be helped in experiencing the space in totality. There is also a kids' play area within the courtyard to ensure that patients with kids don't need to rein them in during their long waits for an appointment. A cafe, pharmacy, the billing department also find their place here. Hence, the functions of various scale and type within this breathable core allow for connections at varied levels. This central atrium-like space has connections with half the rooms through green planter beds and with the other half of the rooms through corridors, the circulation spines of the space. The corridors are designed to activate a play of light and shadow. They are flanked with brick screens that facilitate shaded filtered light from entering the space and sufficient wind circulation to keep the space cool in the summer and warm in the winter. The choice of brick has been fly ash as against traditional clay since it's stronger, lighter, more consistent in finish and more economical, but mostly because it reduces the risk of carbon footprint by using combustible coal from thermal power plants. The terrace has been stepped and landscaped to aid rainwater harvesting by reusing the wastewater for the plants. This provides an additional layer of insulation and keeps the temperature controlled for the floors immediately below it. Patients and their relatives or friends can use the space for their recuperating walks, as well as making social and emotional connects with other fellow users. People going through treatment or their families are usually burdened with emotional or financial struggles. Here, the architecture allows you to create a support system through interaction with people going through similar ordeals. Through the spaces one makes, we have the potential to create impact in the lives of the people we design for. Design when dealt in singularity is one thing, but connections and collaborations enrich our practice, experience, lives, and the ability to empathize with varied individuals, making for a more humane approach towards design. In this next project of ours, a transformative wellness retreat in Goa, interdisciplinary collaborations take center stage in the programmatic and spatial development of the ideology of the retreat. The site is an existing King's Mansion property in Kandalam in Goa. It's a linear site which connects the main road on one side with the beach on the other. The intention of the built structure is to quiet the journey from the chaos of the street to the calm of the beach. So when a visitor enters the retreat, he can leave behind the world he came from and detox in body and mind in totality. The linearity of the site is emphasized by the way the building stretches across it. Right from the entrance, the driveway is mapped along a meandering pathway with a few pauses by the ways of expansions in the road for slowing the pace down and appreciating the landscape. From the drop-off point, a central spine connects the entire resort at the ground level. The entrance step leads to an entrance vestibule, to the reception or the holding pond, where your individual butler takes you to your room. This journey is through a connecting corridor. The scale of this connecting spine fluctuates constantly from wide to narrow to allow and house exposed staircases, vestibules for entrance to individual rooms, dry and wet landscape features, all-day dining cafes that open into garden features, an amphitheater, and finally the pool at the end of the long but leisurely walk. This pathway ensures interaction among the guests of the retreat to the level desired by them. The pool and gym form an end feature of the central connecting spine, and finally open up the property towards a terraced restaurant, outdoor landscape, and finally the beach. Since it is a boutique property, there were just 17 rooms, and hence it was imperative to give the end user the experience of privilege by not being disturbed by the services of how this property functions. However, the service spaces also have their own internal but tucked away connections. A secondary circulation spine, while being hidden from clear sight, primarily connects the back of house of all the guest areas, the place where all the surfaces such as water supply, landscape supply, drainage, rainwater harvesting are all maintained and controlled, while still managing to create breakout spaces for the staff. This project has not only been an exercise in spatial connections, but has also connected people from across the globe by honing their expertise and coming together to make the experience of the end user far more enriched. Red was invited, along with 7 other designers, to create an installation in Delhi out of material that they've been using for many years. The event was titled Materiology. This event was curated by Pramati Madhavji of the Blue Pencil Company and Amit Gupta of Stir. The intention of the installation was to create a prediction of how designers imagine this material to be used in the future. This is how we chose to go about ours. Much has been said about the local and global socio-political environment. Although one is ever eager to judge the situation we're in, we at Red felt it might be a good time for some introspection. One would have read the preamble to the Constitution as a child back in school. It does have some significant and salient features to it, which might be beneficial to abide by. One may not agree in totality with what has been said. However, the intent can be distilled and inculcated into our daily interactions in society. This could trigger off a chain reaction or just remind us of the people we sought out to be. The best way to have something etched in your memory is through repetition. Sometimes the menial act of physically writing something over and over again helps ingrain it in our conscience and subconscious. The intent behind the repetitive writing of the preamble is what we hope helps us absorb and imbibe it to a deeper degree. Being present-day practitioners of design, there was a certain ease of access to the many tools of modern living. Hence, a handwritten note is unequivocally replaced by a gadget. In keeping with modern-day technology of construction, we intended to use a 3D printer to simply pour out and trace over a computer-generated template in concrete. Each time the preamble is written, it is allowed to dry before the entire process is repeated all over again to gain the desired height, sort of like a child being made to practice pattern writing. In order to make the experience shared and interactive, our intent was to have the machine-made platform on display over the course of the exhibition days and have the visitors to the gallery write out the same preamble over a template by using fast-setting concrete cones. Each visitor wrote to his or her capacity a word or a sentence. The amount of concrete that got pushed out of the cone varied owing to the strength capacities of the individual. The idea was that this would lead to an organic development of the table. This was our democratic attempt at building the preamble platform as a group, coming together to make a difference, sharing a common mind space. Thank you for your patience.